exactly step by step. It's really, really easy. So I made this cape, dress, sleeves. Okay, so for the piping, here it is. You just have a strip of the fabric, and I'm using a shoelace here so that you can make like kind of like that's what the piping is. So now I'm basting this on the front piece, and I'll put the other front piece so when you fold it, this will stick out nicely. Okay, so once you've finished, I basted on the front piping. You attach the center front, the bodice front and the bodice back at the shoulder seams. Then I made the lining the exact same way. So you take the right sides together. We're gonna sew the neck opening, flip it inside out. I'm gonna understitch it to keep the lining down, and then we can start with the sleeves. Here I've sewn on the red little dots, and I've used like a really skinny zigzag stitch to sew this on, and I've chosen to use like lycra material. It's not recommended on the fabric, but I decided this because it doesn't fray. If you use any kind of material, like see this kind of threads coming out, it's gonna fray, so that's why I chose this. So what you do, you take the sleeve and see how it has the little dots. You place the red fabric underneath, you move it around until it gets the right thing, pin it, finish off the pinning, and then zigzag. So for the sleeve, now what you do, because it's a puff sleeve, so you go where the dots are and you sew like the really long stitches, and make sure you don't back stitch because you need to gather. So we'll pull these threads to adjust it. So this is the sleeve band facing, right? So this will be folded in half. So what we're going to do, we're going to gather the bottom edge so that this lines up to be the same amount of distance. We'll base this and then we'll sew it. Okay, so after you've sewn on the facing, so that's the bottom part of the sleeve, so this is what did. I've already sewn it onto the main bodice, so this is the shoulder seam all the way to here. So you want to start pinning it, and then make sure that you adjust the gather so that's evening. I like to sew from this side, so that way here you can make sure that you stitch on the other side of the basting, so that when you flip it to the right side, then you won't see any of the thread. Okay, so the next step now is we're going to sew off this seam. So we'll take this, fold this here. So we're going to sew this is the bodice, so this will be the side of your body, and the underarm right here. Okay, so this side I finished off the sleeve already. So you can see I finished off the side seam, and I flipped this part underneath, and I've sewn the cuff, so now this is nice and clean. So this is the other side. So what you do, you pin all the way across underneath the sleeve, the armpit, and then the side seam. We're going to sew this, then we're going to take this sleeve cuff, flip it like this, and you'll have to flip it underneath, and then we'll sew right across this edge, and then the sleeve parts will be done. Okay, so now we're starting the main part of the skirt. So here it is. There's the front piece, which is cut on a fold, and then two back pieces, which are both cut on a fold, so that it's really big, and we're going to gather it. Okay, so for the center front, you got to make sure that you do some extra stitching, because right here we're going to do a little clip here, because that's the front where the V is, so you're going to do that. And then what I've already done, I finished off all the seams, so I did one stitch, 1.5 centimeters, plus then I just finished it off with some serging, so the threads, and then I did 2 stitching here, and we're going to pull the long threads to gather up all the fabric. Okay, so before I started doing any sewing here, I cut out this, and then I actually got some lining because I want to add some netting to make it more puffy. In the pattern, it doesn't have that, but I'm going to do that. So the netting fabric, I'm just using this. It's just some thin, like cotton broadcloth, and you're going to make the lining the exact same way as the dress. Then we'll attach them together, sew to the main dress, zipper, and then finish it up. Okay, so what you want to do after you gathered it, so I've already sewn it on, but you want to pin, make sure you have the center of the point, and then you pin this end, and then you adjust the gathers so it's all even. You place pins, and then you sew really slowly, and I like to sew from this end because then you can see where your stitching needs to be so that you won't have to keep redoing it because you have threads. And then you flip it over, and then have a nice seam like this. Okay, so first we do in 2 steps. We sew this on permanently, and then we're going to take the lining and we're just going to base the lining on, and then we're going to serge this end because it's like fraying everywhere. Okay, so I've pinned the lining up onto the main dress, and you want to make sure that you have the right side sticking up because then you won't have the seams like against your legs. And so I'm just using like a basting stitch, a longer one, because this is just really to put it in, and then we'll just serge this end off. So now we're going to do the zipper. So you want to measure out, just approximate your zipper, the length here, and what you want to do is baste the yellow to the lining. See, I've basted only like a little bit up into about where the zipper is going to be. Okay, afterwards, because this is like all raw edges, you can see on this is the other side, I've serged off this edge all the way down, and when you get to about here, just continue sewing on the yellow. And we can leave the lining unfinished like that. Later on we'll serge it off, and there's no point to do an extra layer. It's because this will be sewing with the sewing machine, and so you want to have the finished edge. Okay, so right now I'm finishing off the hem. What you want to do is fold it down once and tight, and you want to make it as thin as possible. So really, really thin. And here's like the finished edge on this side. So it looks like this, and then afterwards we're going to iron this. And as you're sewing, you can see like all these little threading hairs. So when I sew, I just take my scissors and I clip them a little bit, so then it's more easier to flip over. So after this step, we're going to do all the ironing. And then look, I've already finished off this, the hem for the lining. We're to finish all the ironing, then we're going to make the netting and sew it onto the lining, and then that'll be it. Okay, so to make the dress puffy, so I have this netting here, and you have to make sure that it's quite long. Normally you want it the length of this whole thing because it's going to be gathered and scrunched up. You want to at least double or even more. So this is 2 layers. So I have, see this one, it's cut, so there's 2 layers. What I did, all I did was with a basting stitch, which is like the longest length possible, I just sewed all the way down 1, and then I did it again. Do not back stitch. Afterwards, we're going to pull these threads here, and then we're going to gather up all of this, right, boom, 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 and we're going to sew it to the lining of the dress. Okay, so for the cape, I didn't like it how it's like so long. I found that was too long, so I made it shorter. And also, I'm only going to cut 1 instead of like cutting 2 and using up so much fabric and then having to flip it inside out. I'm only cutting 1, and then I'm going to just finish off like a little hem around the entire. And also, I cut this on a fold, so that way there'll be no like center seam down the back of the cape. For the cape, I've just gone around and done a small little skinny narrow hem, and then afterwards make sure you iron it so it keeps it nice and flat. So to finish up the cape, all I did was gather up the top edges, and you just get another piece of fabric, and see, like, this is just to cover up like the ugly ends, and then you can hand sew this in.